Hi. So I took yesterday off of going live because I actually worked on the previous section. Now, before jumping into this, I was reading through my notes and what I wrote yesterday. And so, actually, before I start talking about that, I want to talk about what we're going to do today. So, today we're going to talk about where manifestation actually begins. And as previously mentioned, if you've watched other sections, we've talked about how there's creating and there's building. And the creation process is actually like in this upper stratosphere of pulling the parts in that you very likely don't have full access to yet, or you do, but I'm going to assume that you don't. And then the building part is in the lower hubs, which is the connecting with people, doing things, creating resonance, and then the consistency and completion component of it. But right now, this is where a lot of people feel this need that of this sensibility about wanting to manifest things, but where this can go wrong, where you start building before you have a vision that is uniquely yours. And this is something where, the Thomas Merton quote, which is that old age is getting to the top of the ladder and realizing you climbed the wrong one. This is investing time in a space that is, like, admittedly a little bit uncomfortable because it's really, like, luminous and numinous and, and spacious and, can feel it's the antithesis of control, which is also incredibly uncomfortable. If you have especially if you haven't done, like, really any contemplation and work and transmutation of that quality within yourself. And so I wanna just, like, respect that this can be particularly difficult, but it goes back to, kind of even the notion that controlling actually makes you easier to control. Like, the need to have control makes you someone that because, like, control happens in very narrow parameters. So what we're doing now is we're opening the aperture to get access to a knowing that is so uniquely tied to who we are and so uniquely tied to something that is inside of us that represents a kind of unique existential angst, so to speak, which has to do with, like, what is your dharma, what is your gifts, and having the patience and having the intestinal fortitude, having the ability to concentrate, the ability to stay in a place that is liminal and unstructured. And that's why we climb up the path and we work on these qualities so that once we come here to create incredible things, that we have some of these capacities at least consciously surfaced and some of this ability accessible to us. But if you have none, follow along and do the absolute best you can. If you're feeling called to this, you're going to know that you're feeling called to it, because this is not the manifestation technique for, the masses. This is for actually creating new worlds. And so, yeah, this is revolutionary transformation. This is transformation for for seismic shifts. And so the amount of investment is commensurate with, like, really making sure that this is the right thing for you. And so I was originally going to share a lot. We're going to do an exercise today. There's two in this particular section. If you're following along in the book, it is in this in our textbook here. We're at page 291, and and it's specifically the seventh hub descending. Which, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this sort of, like, in the jargoniness of it. I'm just gonna get really, like, deep, like, dive right into what the practice is. And, and I am gonna explain, I had originally intended to disclose a lot about my own process because I'm gonna be doing a process in step with recording these videos and talking about what the steps are. But, you know, one of the things that actually came up in the previous reading in on page 290 when we talked about the funnel was that there are two things. Like the one thing, you know, there are two questions. One was the specific goal and purpose, and how will you measure success? And the other was the practical matter of financial runway. And I think for me, and also this will be made clear about why I'm making this decision because it will be explained later in the process about when something is ready to be shared with other people. But there's also a half of this process that I actually don't share. Um, I don't share with an earlier version of myself in terms of being somebody who's creating and building things, which is being financially free. And so that actually plays into you know, a lot of the contemplation early on, this initial contemplation about what is your specific goal, purpose, and how will you measure success. I spent a lot of time, or at least I would say a lot of like concentrated focus on it. I'm not even gonna call it time. I put a lot of focus into that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that here. And then the other part about like how much runway do you have? And, you know, in the last reading, I talked a little bit about sort of what type of bandwidth and what do you, you know, and how to create the space to be able to build things in a practical reality that requires the ability to pay bills and create, you know, like physical stability, like, you know, the first hub stuff. And so it definitely, and I will, one note I'll make is that I've had students of this process be frustrated by this, because they're considering me to not be in touch with this aspect of creation. But the reality is that I created my ability to not have that be part of my, like, this a strain on my reality, by using this very process. So it's kind of like there's a bit of like a meta aspect in that, but because like there's that, and also there's aspects of I'm what's coming forward that is just too nascent to share, especially in this format, which is I also have some reluctance to putting this in a public format because it's super powerful. And the only thing that makes me comfortable sharing it is that I know nobody watches these for the most part. You're like, you know, there's only a few of us, you know, future you watching this right now as I'm recording it. There's nobody watching it. Um, but, like, we're a small group of people, and that makes me comfortable, and also the fact that all my preamble is probably gonna cut a lot of people out from sticking with this, so there's sort of a, I guess, a moat around this that's just naturally formed. The fact that it's the end of the book, and I won't go too deep into this, which is that, you know, in my previous lives where I have taught people how to access like greater levels of creation and building and power. Um, Many times I've had a hard time with it afterwards because I've realized that my own limitations at the time, which thankful to a lot of the process in Parinama has kind of fortified, rectified, reclaimed. Um, I was giving power to people who, like, I wasn't vetting them properly because they were meeting my adaptations, you know, mainly in the form of flattery, which I couldn't recognize at the time because I was so hungry for my own sense of power and my own desire for validation from other people. So here we are sharing this. So, okay, so I'm gonna read the seventh hub descending. So the exercise for today is the do nothing, inquiry, and receptivity. And I'm just trying to think about like what the right order is for doing this. 'Cause it feels like there like, I'd wanted to talk about the goal, purpose, and measurement component that I spent my own time on, or, like, I spent my time on between this, but it feels like that has passed. So, yeah, I'm actually not gonna talk more into that. It just like, it doesn't have any juice anymore. I mean, the only thing is just saying, like, my goal. So, it's kind of like what and why, and, like, kind of how will I know? So, the goal is, like, what is it that I wanna accomplish? And the purpose is why, why, why? And the measurement is how will I know? How will I know? It just occurred to me that it's that succinct. Like this. And the other thing is, I wanna talk about this too, just as far this might take up probably the next, like, 3 minutes, but there's 2 things about creating and the process of building really big, interesting, difficult to build things because 'cause you're moving against a gradient of status quo and what already exists, and one of them is that you have to keep moving. So, when you hit a roadblock, and this actually is it's topical because with the Parinama book, it was written completely out of sequence because there were just times, there were always times where I would hit something, it would just be too difficult. It would be too hard, it would be too laborious, or I'd, like, lose kind of juice in it, so I'd go somewhere else and work somewhere else in the book. So, it's why this reading has been the first time I've ever read the book completely cover to cover, and even I mean, actually, funnily enough, even then I flipped the last 2 chapters, but that's, like, not really too meaningful. But so the things keep moving. So if you and this is a little bit ahead, so I'm just bringing this up. It's a little ahead of where we are because we're about to talk about doing nothing. But just the idea that movement and showing up and doing is really important. So it's like if you're kind of like, "Oof, like this part of this process just gives me no energy." Just do some like think of something else that's small that you could do that would also like feed the momentum of it instead of just being like, I'm done for today. Just see if there's something else you can do. If you have time, just see if there's something else, if there's a little something you could read, you like look back through a journal entry, just sit quietly and contemplate it, reread what you've done, re-listen to, like just like something. If you're kind of like you can't create anymore, maybe like consume things like that'll help with inspiration. So it's just like to keep on moving. And also even and this is something that I need to continuously learn is like physical movement in the face of feeling kind of like "Oof," is to like move. And the other thing is state, and this is something that I may at some other time go a little bit more deeply into, and this is something I do very passively now. And it's really esoteric, admittedly, and it would be strange to expect me to be able, I don't know, whatever. I'm not going to make any expectations here, but it's kind of like one of the things is like getting into a state where you're connecting with yourself. And this is once again why the ascending path of this entire book up until now is important, is like meaningful, is that the ascending path is helping with being able to have this relationship that's very internal. And so in my experience, in terms of activations, so one of the things I had to do with, quite frankly, making a lot of money was not just so the thing I'm gonna talk about with state creation, it's not just creating the state just anywhere. It's creating the state in a place where there's the conditions to make it possible, at least in my experience. So the part of that is very practical. part of that is incredibly practical, where it's not, kind of like sitting, like my example that's like now 10 years old that just drove me nuts was watching somebody lounging in a cafe, a white person lounging in a cafe in Bali saying, my laptop broke, so now I'm just focused on manifesting a new one. And I was like, oh my God, that's so aggravating. And then, like, if their parents buy it, they're like, "I did it." It's like, yeah, dude. It's more like when we're talking, this is a very specific type of creation where we're pulling things out of the ether, and if you know, you know. And one of the things is, like, there's, like, at least I'm gonna speak from my own experience, there's a magnetic feeling that's, like, in the area in the heart that it's like that I'll get myself into actually kind of a little bit of a semi-trance state and activate it, and I'll repeat. And since we're in the 5th hub and the top hub, I'd say, I know, and I'm not gonna say it out loud 'cause I'm actually not gonna do it in this, right now, but I'll repeat it, and I'll actually, like, really tune in to what I want to be creating. And I used to do this in my office. I would do it in my office, is that I would actually start activating this feeling. It's super bizarre in the context of where I was doing it. Um, but I would it's like, be almost like witchcraft, like creating this spell. And I'd be creating the state I was going to achieve. I was creating just the state. I didn't know how I would get to it. I'd create the state of like, of like ecstasy. Of like, "Oh my god," like, so that's me play acting it, but I'd feel it. And I'd repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, and strengthen, like, "Oh my god, uh, like, and, so I'm not accessing it right now, but, like, the outward appearance of it, and so I just activate it, and one of the things I think that is worth mentioning is that like, one of the things about almost everything that I've created of note, which has to do with teams, that lead to hundreds of millions of dollars, to this book. If you've read the book, it's kinda like, "How the fuck did you write this thing?" Was actually, that's been pretty universally the response people get when they have their hands on it. It's it's just beyond, it's beyond, it's beyond, it's beyond. And all sorts of other things, like, and I'm not gonna sort of list my accomplishments, but this thing about, like, this state, like, what's the state that I'm trying to ground here? And it's not just that this is the only thing you do. We're gonna do everything here. But it's like getting this state, and it kinda draws some of these factors in that, and it brings some power into these things that we're going to go through. And what because it's like the thing about, like, drawing in the right people, the right answers, the right inspiration, the right level, like the energy, just like the ability to kind of see the thing that you need, that is like the solution, to ask the questions. So that's it. Okay, so I'm gonna read this, and I'm gonna also be doing it, like, I don't think I'm gonna be doing it live here, but maybe, I don't know, I don't remember what part this is. This is the 7th hub descending. So before bringing anything new into your life, the first step is to create physical and psychological space by inviting stillness. See chapter 10. If you get defensive and feel especially challenged by new ways of doing things or by ideas that stretch your mental capacity, then make some room. It's especially helpful to be open to the possibility that you could be wrong about things, such as how the world works regarding money or opportunity, and the acknowledgement of that your mindset, your beliefs and attachments can be holding back your potential for creating and building. It's interesting to me to read this right now on the other side of having, like, what I would call seismic catastrophic belief systems, like, absolutely, like, decimated. On the other side of this, I wrote this before because the thing is like with breakthroughs, like the idea that it's like there's this like one big boom, the Great Bang Theory or what the Big Bang Theory, it's not how it works. Like, this is a very compassionate process just by its nature because it's natural, is that it unfolds in this way that for the most part is very, like, measured, and it fits into what the capacity is that you bring to it. So, if like this quick fix thing, it's like, "I just want this to be done." You'd literally incinerate, and I'm saying literally, like, and I had these experiences, and this is probably going a little too far, is when I was writing this book where I would just it would be, like, electrical because it would just be so much current in terms of, like, ideas and inspiration, and I could feel the power of things changing too quickly. Um, also for mental health, it can be too shocking. So it's like this slow shift to revelations, the slow shift to seeing. But reading this, it's really interesting to see that, to be like, yeah, that's a phenomenon that is just kind of fractals. It's true and at scale, I guess. Okay, so do nothing. It's the first exercise here. So and begin. So if you are bold enough to proceed, turn back now. If you're not bold enough, turn back now. We're about to go in. It's all been preamble until, well, yeah, pretty much until now. So do nothing, inquiry, and receptivity. So begin a process of inquiry and allow inspiration to arrive by giving it wide open space. If you don't have an idea, you'll need to coax it forward by asking questions that have deep resonance for you. This active paradox of doing nothing and actively holding the space for inspiration can be unfamiliar and uncomfortable because many of us live in a world of near constant activity and distraction. And that sounds, when I'm reading that, I'm hearing that as being like slightly judgmental, like in a world of near constant activity and distraction. But, the thing I want to point to is that as it's a coping mechanism, once again, that grew from a need to feel some control in conditions that are really like untenable to face head on with the tools that we have at the time when we initially encountered the the circumstances and the situations. It's just, yeah. So this, yeah, I have more than I could say, but I'm not going to. The seventh hub processes are an overlooked and largely unknown stage of creation. You may feel that you're meant to build a company, yet you don't have big ideas. You may want to write a book, but you don't know what to write about or even how to write. Perhaps you want to connect with your purpose, yet feel lost not knowing what it could be. Even it's even if it's only a single minute every day, clear space in your thoughts, ask a specific question in earnest, underlined, bold. It's not in the book, but I'm doing it. And allow for revelation to arrive. Don't rush or force it. Eventually it comes. Some New Age teachers imply that we're not comfortable with quiet, but I counter this. It's not the quietness of our inner space that we avoid, it's the loudness of the revelations that we may not feel ready to know. We avoid meditation because when the inner voice is given a microphone, it can have disruptive things to say. God, fuck, that is true. Pardon my language. It's so true. Jeez, that's really true. Yeah, this is talk about something holding up on the other side of yeah. Oh my lord. Heaven help us. Okay. Where do we have to? Your inner voice will wait to reveal itself to make sure you're ready. Oh, When you ask into the void about how your life's purpose can be of greater service, how receptive you are to hearing the answer without trying to steer the narrative into comfortable, familiar territory will inform the quality of the answer you receive. What if this responsive inspiration indicates that there are things in your life that need to be reconsidered, such as your career, habits, or certain relationships? There's almost always something you're doing that we're doing that makes us feel safe but holds us back. And just because something is difficult to know, awareness of it does not mean you need to act on it. You can also explore with, I may not be ready to act on this, but I'm ready to listen. Mhm. Oof. Oof, this book is really good. This book is really good. Oh my gosh. Woo! Oh my god. Many of us are aware that we lack answers to important questions, but don't consider that we first need the right questions. Questions. Most of us were educated and or trained how to have answers, not how to ask questions. Start with finding your question. Perhaps something like, what do I truly care about? Or how do I best serve the world? This one is particularly strong, and if you have something more specific, use it. Ask your questions with the vastness of your faith, cosmic connection, higher power, or your own inner knowing. As the old business adage goes, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. It applies here. Which, by the way, is not entirely true. Yeah, I mean, honest as somebody it's not entirely true. Allow for the answer to come. Keep allowing for emptiness and be patient. The answer is trying to find you, and it may not come in a clear revelation or it may come into focus, slowly arriving in bits and pieces. Try to capture arising insights by writing them down. Even when they're incomplete sentences or pictures, you make a sketch. So there may be cross currents that come up as you begin to ask your questions. See chapter 9. And also, we're about to do an exercise on it. This is just how the mind works. So the trick is to know these thoughts are not signs that you shouldn't proceed. See them for what they are, products of adaptations and holding patterns. Before you can move to sharpen the vision of the sixth hub, the distortion of cross currents needs to be addressed. That is the next exercise that we'll do. Whew. Wow. Okay. So let's talk about this. The question. It's kind of weird. I don't feel like the heading for this section is accurate. I feel like it should be called the question, like space. Yeah. So the thing that came up that I want to address here before wrapping up here is that the idea that you're going to ask, so there's two things. There's two very specific gates in this step of the process. One is, what is my question? If it's like, what is my purpose? Go for it. But like, it needs to feel like something that has a little juice in it. So if what is my purpose is like sort of, it's like what would, it's like what would give my life like, find the version of asking the question that has some activation in it. So, and also watch what arises with it. Because something, this is almost like burying the lead. Something about creating and building is that one of the things about putting the cart before the horse is trying to figure out how to make something financially feasible before it exists. And what actually makes something financially feasible is figuring something out that people value and then figuring out how people value it. It's figuring something out, creating something, and then connecting it to how other people can value it. And spoiler alert here, the things that are valuable to you are valuable to other people. So your exploration of finding these things is part of the manifestation of, like, the connection um, to, like, the financial aspect of this. But the financial aspect of this is in the lower hubs, and this is another thing that's a very, like, not understood because most people that are teaching manifestation have actually only, like, manifested their methodology for talking about manifestation. Um, Which is just such a weird thing. But the bottom line is there is a period of time that is in sort of like spirit and in creation that's not really connected with like the kind of practical reality of codifying money into a currency. It's just money in terms of it being free energy. So the energy of it is like it's in a I guess in a way, it's like recognizing that this is recognizing that. Um, but this is mm, so when I'm talking about the question, and goes back to me not sharing my process as it relates to, the financial runway, um, because I don't have one, like okay, is that part of the asking the question is realizing that the higher up you can get in terms of, like, your ask, the more access you're gonna get, and I think that's actually incredibly abstract. Because you can use this to say, "I wanna get rich." It works. But there's a higher level of inspiration that if you access it, you're going to be able to access more wealth. And once and it's a gate, like, there's kind of yeah. There's a gate or, like, a very significant price that's paid. So to have it all yeah, I'm not gonna talk anymore about that. So, okay, so what are the 2 things we're doing here? One is that we're creating the question. What is it that we want to know? Like, what truly matters to me? And one of the things I wanna point out to this is that it's not it most of the time, it's like little it's gonna test you. There is a testing. It's kind of like it's like, is it safe to come out? So it'll give you, like, a little piece of something. So it's just being very receptive to clues and to dreams and to recommendations people make for you and things that come across your path, things you hear that stand out to you. It's like really listening. It's like it's going to come through, and it's building the capacity to be able to receive that. And also, I think there's something about this, like, in that, and maybe I'm, like, personifying it, but the trust of in yourself that you're willing to hear it out. You're not gonna, like, crush it or be like, "This that can't be it." And you're not trying to steer you're like trying to steer this. Like you're literally taking your hands off the wheel and you're like, okay, where does, where does the car, where's it going to drive? And and like the thing about keeping on grabbing the wheel and be like, no, it's this versus being like taking the hands off the wheel. And it's like sometimes it'll like like be like, oh my God, the car's about to go into a wall. And then it's like starts to fly or whatever, or corrects immediately, and it's like, okay, like there's this trust that's being built that's like you're going to let it show you. And it's like almost like a game of chicken in some ways. If you know, you know. I'm not gonna try to convince anybody that this is true. It's just is. Either know or you know, or you don't know or whatever. But so part of the thing is like asking the question in earnest and being consistently demonstrating like the care and the conviction to know. And as difficult things come up, being able to kind of, like address those. This process can take a while. This process can take a while. Or, I mean, at least it always has for me, because it's always steered me towards things I don't want to do. So there's just the work of that, of like getting through. I mean, I was so mad when Parinama method was coming through. It's not what I wanted to be doing, but it was like the core of my inquiry. Actually, this is a good way to put this. The core of what the ask was and what I was like, and even going back to my ultimate, um, you know, like 20-ish years earlier, 15 years, whatever, of, that initial, like the secret of like, what is it that I really want, which is freedom, not even like kind of only being able to have like a taste of what that feeling would be. That, it's like that kept, that like if that like, I don't know, cast a spell or something that, for the even maybe the first year to 2 years and even before that, my resentment for being pulled by this, all it, I still sometimes when I'm talking about it, it doesn't, I don't have it anymore. Um, but I will say that there was just the like, in this particular stage, specifically, I would say I'm gonna just specifically use this book as an example and the methodology it contains and, like, the landing of the spaceship kinda thing of this, is that I spent a lot of time being upset that part of being able to do it meant that I did need to shed things I was attached to that were blocking my access to it. And it was like I had built this perfect American life as an executive with a partner and a fantastic lifestyle and practice, and I mean, like this like one percenter life, and that that it was like it wasn't right, and I was really resentful of it. I knew it was like I could either like carry this angst, but it was like it also wasn't all bad. It wasn't all bad. Like, and that's, another part of it is that, but there was something stronger, a stronger pull. And so that is when we're talking about this particular stage of the creation process, which is the question and the reception, is that I'm speaking very specifically to my own resistance, the fact that I was resentful of what the answer was to my inquiry. And so that created a lot of friction. And I'm not looking at it and saying that it should have been any other way. It was exactly how it was, and actually one of the things that's helpful is I can talk about it here, um, for somebody else's creation process, but it was like, "What is my purpose?" And that my purpose was something that I really didn't wanna be doing. And I still face that right now, and this is something that I'm gonna be doing in this process, which is that, um, I don't really I've never wanted to be a guru. I don't wanna be like, there's all this stuff about having this, like, very potent, powerful methodology and also having a lot of aversion to, like, the conventional ways of bringing it into the world, and also doing it, like, sort of absolved, dissolved, and resolved me from needing, external validation of my power, and also even external the need to be, considered worthy. Like, this practice and this process actually just created that as a self-sustaining aspect of myself. So, I guess, my I would say that my hope here is that in terms of self-actualization, the next like, as Maslow before, kind of before his death and very little known, instead of Maslow's hierarchy ending in self-actualization, it was actually self-transcendence. So part of my process right now is like, okay, like, when do like, to access the energy around the aspect of like, okay, well, I have it now, and like, where do I find this activation to be really motivated to find the power that I used to have to, like, bust down doors and be really, forceful. My inflating third adaptation to bring this into the world in a way that is really, like, in alignment with my integrity and also connected to what this inquiry had originally been. But yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't really connected that, which was how resentful I was. I mean, like, one more story I'll just quickly tell is that when I knew I had to divest myself, like, that this thing was coming through and it was really powerful, just hijacked my life. I spent years working on it around the clock, yeah, like, financing it, producing it, everything, everything about this book. Yeah. I mean, it's really massive in its scope and, like, what it contains. It's not even the book, it's like a methodology, just something that's contained within it, that I still missed. I still had this wistful thing about like, because I live in the middle of this very conventional wealth world, and I remember I did this talk for a program about, I think it was, like, business, like, enterprise selling or some shit like that, and it was this really surreal thing because it was like a Zoom call because it was, like, deep pandemic, and like, the video option of it, there were, like, I don't know, I think there was maybe, like, 40 or 50 people in the session, but I couldn't see anyone. So I was just talking to myself, which is so hi to one person. Hi. I was hello. Mm. Um, and after I was done, because I was out of that world already, and it was, like, really hard because it was, like, I knew I was, like, really good at this, at, at business or whatever, this aspect of business that people all were, like, wanting to be good at. Turns out I don't think I'm a particularly good teacher of it, turns out. Anyway, but, um and I remember I went for a walk afterwards, and I live near a street, it's called Newbury Street in Boston, and it was like people were out, it was like evening, and there were people at, like, the outdoor cafes, and it was this time that, like, now I don't feel this way, but I felt so separated from that world, and I remember the feeling of being like a ghost walking around in a world I wanted to still live in, and, even though there was, like, this really strong sense of connection and conviction to the work that I was doing, where it felt so true and so real and so right. I have never been in a process to this day like what writing Parinama and developing it and going through it was like. It was literally, like, so clear. It was exactly what I was supposed to be doing, full stop. And I used to even have the thing where if there was something that would, like, feel like it was, like, even vaguely life-threatening, I would feel this responsibility to the existence of this, where I'd be like, "Just let me live long enough to write this book." Like, it was like this calling that was pulling me. And even while that was happening, like, the sense of, like, there was still this kind of lingering thing. It's gone now. It's gone. I have no desire for that now. No desire. Oh boy, no desire. That is, like, for that world as it exists, and that's actually helpful to talk about because it does have something to do with, what I personally am looking to create with this as we go through this process together, um, in in my process about what I want, what I seek to create. So, yeah, what's the question? And allowing receptivity to the fact that the answers are very likely, if very they're gonna come. Well, I'll talk to my about my own thing, come kind of slowly. They're kind of like, "Are you really ready to know? Are you really ready?" And I'll be like, "Here, I'm gonna show you a glimpse of this in a dream," or I'm going to you're gonna hear a podcast that's gonna kind of come across your life, or there's gonna be a somebody says something in a restaurant, or you're in a movie and something about it steps forward, and it's like, "Oh, yeah." And it's like, "Ooh, I think that's it. I think that's there's something there." And yeah, and I mean, like, another and I mean, like, I remember someone who worked with me many moons ago, knew that I didn't really want, that there was this kind of sense of angst in being a person that worked in business, and so they got me this career book about, like, figure out what you are. It's like, kinda thing, like, it's a famous career book, and this is a long time ago. This is, like, 15 years ago, and I remember I was, like, 2 pages in, I was like, "Nope, nope, 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 nope," because I knew immediately that what the book was gonna tell me was gonna be something that, like, I wasn't really prepared to assume as part of, like, what I wanted to be at the time and what I believed that needed, and again, like, no regret for that. I think, like, showing some grace in one's own process for that, about being like, "Yeah, I'm not really ready for this." I think if I could go back, and I think in a certain way I did go back to this, which was realizing that what I did need to build a bit more of my, like, personal wealth, or at least that's how it worked out, and it worked out pretty well. And also the mundaneness of the work that I did and how hard a slog it was, and the things that I learned through it. There was nothing that was lost on it, I don't feel. But anyway, so it's like, what's the question? And it can be anything. Like, anything that has a feeling that just has some truth to it being a question, has some earnestness, has some energy in it. Like, it's like, what's the meaning of life? If you don't give a shit, if it's literally like, "Hey, if I knew this, then I'd be," like, it's like, no, 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 no. This is for you. This is a connection to yourself. It's asking a question that you're almost, like, afraid to know the answer to. Okay, full circle there. It's like, what's my purpose? Like, what's this meaning? How do I serve in this life? How do, what, um and I'm using the ones that I use. It can be anything. It's like, if it is, like, how do I become rich? Like, be ready, it might not be what you wanna hear. Like, that's just the thing. If you knew the answer, you'd know the answer. Like, the fact is you don't know the answer. So, like, the question has never been asked. It's just been like, I know what the answer, it's like, what's the life force? Like, nobody knows. It's two, this, that, like that kind of thing. And back to like in the reading, which is like, it's like we're so used to just like being on the sharp end of the stick to have answers. Um, isn't like Jeopardy? It's like, what is the Yeah, what's interesting? Jeopardy is like the answer is the question, which is kind of a cool thought. Sorry, that's totally a tangent a tangent, but, like, just the thing that's interesting, which is, like, to know the question is to have the answer, and so find the question, and it's, like, it really to explore that, and then develop the receptivity to, like, receive the answer. So, yeah. So, okay, so this is, if you're following along the book, this is page 291 here, and I'm actually writing notes in this book as I read it. Um, so 291, and then the next exercise that we're gonna do, uh, either tomorrow or the next day, depending on my own process, because I'm actually making the space to really do this, is working with the cross currents. And this is really an exercise about, and this is something I forget because I don't have this anymore. At least, no, I don't wanna say that. I just, because I probably like, it's very likely that I do, it's just deeper now. It's not as, like, recognizable, is the contrary. And so as you're, this is like working with the doubt. It's working with doubt, actually. It's just working with doubt. And it's a really powerful exercise. If you wanna read ahead, go for it. We'll do it together. Yeah, it's really good. But to get there, and maybe it makes sense to read this at the same time, but I'm not going to, because the cross currents are a big part of this kind of resistance that happens with asking the question, and then being willing to receive the answer. So the cross current, because part of the thing with the receptivity can be like, I don't know how to write a book, or I don't know how to do that. And as I talked about earlier in the session, it's like, like speaking, like, it doesn't work that way. You don't know how to do it. The thing you're supposed to do, you do not know how to do it yet, and you're not, and that's the thing. That's where the energy comes from. There's like an energy that comes from receiving, and this process actually helps, this process of asking the question and learning how to receive inspiration winds up being part of the actual process in and of itself, which is like learning how to see and be able to divine the things that are like coming through with kind of magnetism for the thing that you're trying to do. And yeah, I mean, like, I think, like as mentioned, it's like with this book, like the most common question or the response people have gotten are like, how did you do that? You know, because it's just so, I mean, it is like, it slaps from cover to cover, and it is dense, it is massive, and even the production of it is, like, absolutely, like, excellent. And I didn't know how to, like, write an email, and it was gruesome. Like, my first manuscript was like something you'd think like a 7th grader who was, like, pretty smart, had a lot of time on their hands, but had, like, limited cognitive capacity, would create and send to an editor. It was a mess. My editor said, "It's like the stable boy who's happily shoveling shit." And people say, why is he so happy? And he's like, "Well, with this much shit, there's gotta be a pony in here somewhere." I mean, it just really was, and it was, like, embarrassing. I was, like, so horrified because it was like, I mean, go back to the fact that I've, like, surrendered this significant aspect of my life to create this big, pile of shit, And I worked before I sent it to her too, I had worked, like, around the clock to get it into this pile of shit condition. Like, it had but I just didn't know how to do anything. So, it was like I'd work hard on it, and it just was, like, working hard without skill and knowing how. So, like, the idea that it's, like, this question, and this is actually probably worth bringing in here, is that the idea that the inspiration that's gonna come through is gonna be like, "Oh, I know how to do that. That makes a ton of sense." It's like, it makes no sense. It makes no sense, you know? I mean, when I built a team, I remember I built the first team I built, I went from 0 to, like, I think it was, like, $300 million in revenue in the 3rd year of its existence, and, I kind of was taken on this, like, little tour of technology companies because people were like, "How did you do that?" 'Cause I'd only been on, like, shitty teams with bad managers. Like, I'd been in sales. I'd been in pharmaceutical sales and then medical device sales, and then I did this thing, and it was this. It's just this. It's like this quality of receptivity, and I think about I mean, if I'm being honest, I let myself be completely consumed by it. So that's also something that I'm not probably, like, fully revealing here is, like, my willingness to be consumed by by a process, which probably speaks to the scale of it, to, like, this of the things that I built, but it's not necessarily, like that's not required for everyone. But anyway, it's like I didn't know how to do any of it. I didn't know how to do any of it. Building a team. I was lucky, my boss didn't know how to do it either, so, like, my boss and my boss's boss and nobody in the company had ever done it before, so nobody knew, so nobody got in the way of trying to insert an agenda. I mean, that was luck that everyone was completely, like, ignorant and that we were just all we had was open space to create. Nobody was, like, filling it with, like, "This is how you do it, this is how you do it." I mean, there was some of that, but that actually gave me energy, is it when people would say, "No, I think you're supposed to do it this way." Um, I got really energized by fighting them and proving them wrong because I could sense my sense of, like, tapping into this was, like, giving me really great direction, and yeah, and I mean, I was such a warrior about it with people. It's really, really, like, wild. Like, it was me, this, at the time, like, a young woman, who'd gone to a regional state school in New Hampshire, like, kind of going to war with all of these guys, these white guys who had gone to business school at the top institutions, and I remember that I mean, I didn't really care that much about it. It kept being used against me. It's like, "How could you be this smart when you're just all your markings are wrong?" And I kinda just there was something that was, like, really I remember this one time in a meeting of the entire company, someone kind of openly questioned what I was doing, and I was so excited in this, like, I was pissed, and I was like I went and I took my team into a room, and I said, "This person doesn't believe we're gonna knock 'em down, like, one by one." Oh my god. This really is a live journal. This is a live journal. Yeah, and it happened, it was like all these people that were like, "Oh," like, there was kinda a lot of, like, looking down their nose, and I think one of the things that like, my competence was just too undeniable, but also the fact that I just wasn't playing to them. I was really willing to go to war against their ideas that sucked and stand by them because I didn't care. I was like, "Okay, what's your worst? I lose my job? I'd rather lose my job." My statement of, "I'd rather, die standing than live on my knees." This is good to remember. I haven't felt this I haven't been, like, super in this energy, which I think I need right now. Yeah. It's good to remember this. So this is kind of like journaling, my out loud journaling. Thank you for thank you, thank you, thank you for being along for the ride. So whoever you are, lone watcher, I love you. And hopefully, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful for you. And I think at the hour mark I'm about to hit. So I'm going to wrap up for now. But next session is the working with cross currents, which is probably a really good companion to this first section now that I'm reading it and understand, like really thinking about it. But that's just how it's going to work out. It's going to be a separate section. So I'll see you next time. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Let's build some stuff. Let's change the world. Let's do it. Let's do it together. All right. Bye for now.